So this is part 3 of Redux fundamentals, where we are now in the process of taking an application that was not using Redux and converting it, or adding Redux in, I should say, for state management, for global state management. This is our cat tinder application. We can see it. Let's just see. I'll organize this way. Yeah, there we go. And we can see now, ooh, I'm not running my server yet. So nothing is happening because my server is not running. As we can see, we failed to fetch, so there are no cats. So let me just grab my server quickly. Cat tinder backend Rails S. So once that's running, then I should be able to refresh this page. And oh, I need to run on port. Wait, it shouldn't have overtaken my NPM. It should have given me an error saying it was already taken. That was interesting. It almost seems like Rails swooped in and kind of took over NPM there for a second. But let's see what happens now. Now we're in good shape. So now we've got all our cats, and
Howard, sorry to interrupt you. Are you screen sharing yet?
Thank you. Oh goodness! Thank you for saying that, because I don't know how far I would have gone. Oh, Nadi mentioned it in the chat. I appreciate that. Anyway, yes. Now I need to screen share. Now, am I screen sharing now? Can you see now our cats? I've got my terminal, my code, my terminal.
Yeah, it's fine now.
And my browser window here. So so I'll show you the repository. That's the question that's live here. So I'm going to say, hey, Git, what is the remote repo for this? And it's going to say it is Howard B. Dev, React fundamentals, cat tinder. So I'm going to copy this, and I will type in github.com and paste that in for you. There it is. So that is the repo. There is a branch, and it's important that the Redux branch is add Redux. There is no Redux on the master branch currently. I'm not sure if that's going to change or not. So make sure you check out add Redux if you want to look at the Redux stuff. So I don't remember sort of exactly where we left off, but it's always fun to explore and figure that out. We've got our like cats on our left, our dislike cats on our right. We've been adding in some Redux, and let's just look at our Redux store. What have we done so far? It looks like we've got an init and a set cats. We've got our initial state. Let's just look at, looks like, it's hard to see which cat is what. Looks like Michael is the next one up. I don't know where Michael is in this mess. Let's see if I can find one that's undecided. Liked, liked, disliked. Do I have any? I must have a few undecideds left. Maybe it's only these last couple. Here's one. Okay, this is Michael. Okay, there's Michael. Michael is number 28, undecided. If I click like, Michael becomes liked. And if we refresh the page, Michael is still liked. So we have added that functionality using Redux, which is pretty cool. So let's check that out. Let's kind of see what we did. This was, I believe, kind of where we ended up. We look at, this is our patch request that we're sending. In fact, we can see that in the network tools. We can see that's our initial fetch request. Here's our XHR request. Well, maybe. Let's see what happens when we like crazy eyes. There we go. There we see our patch request right there, which is what we fired off initially when we like a cat. Once that resolves, we can actually dispatch the like cat's success action that we wrote up here, which simply then updates the cat, passes our like cat success to the reducer, passing in the cat, and the reducer now knows what to do. we find the cat and we simply assign its status as liked. And we return the cat within this mapping, which returns our new array, which updates our state for us to the new cats array. Any questions about this? But, and what we've done is, if we look at display cat, not display cat, yeah, no, display cat for our liked button, which is this guy right here, we now have an onClick that fires like cat, passing cat as an argument. We basically, the nice thing is, we can simply copy paste almost this entire operation now for dislike. And that's okay. Like with Redux, we're going to define our actions very specifically. Some of the actions are very, very similar. But rather than that being sort of a violation of making our code a little bit repetitious, instead it's like being very super clear and very, very prescriptive of what we're going to do and how. So basically what I can think about doing, starting down here with my display cat, I know I want a handle dislike click. That's going to be an action, which means it's going to be available as a prop. I'm going to define it as a prop here. Oh no, wait a minute, sorry. I'm talking two different things here. Sorry about that, hang on a second. Okay, so this is of course not what I'm doing at all. I'm going to create a new action called dislike cat. Okay. If I'm going to be able to import this, I need to export it from my actions. So I'm going to kind of think about the steps I'm going to take to do this. Before I start coding, I'll kind of write these down. Like anytime I need to add a new action, right? So let's think about that. I'm going to make a little note here, I guess. Maybe in the whole thing, like Redux notes. Okay. So when I need functionality, I need to think about the Redux ingredients, okay? Which are what? I know I need an action, probably need an action creator. I need to think about, is it asynchronous? If so, I need an asynchronous action. I should say an async action creator. And then once I've created it, I need to add a section to the reducer, add or create a reducer, depending. I need to add to my reducer. And then finally, once all this is done, then I need to import my new action creator. I need to add that action creator to my connect function as the second argument. And I have two options here. Create, one option is, oops. What are my two options? Y'all can help me out with this. What are my two options when it comes to taking an action and connecting it? It's really more than two options, but we'll boil it down to two options. What two options? Anybody?
Inline or define the dispatched props separately.
That's exactly right. And of course, this boils down to the same syntax as simply this, for shorthand. Or define a map state. Oh, sorry, map dispatch to props function as it as the second argument to connect. So what that finally does is exactly as the name would imply. It allows me to then finally use, once all this is done, which is kind of a lot of steps, right? So it's not just like one thing. Once all this is done, I can finally refer to the action as a prop, named whatever I named it in my map state, in my map dispatch to props, which I'll say mddtp, either the object or the object within. Either way, it's an object. The object property name within the object I pass, either pass in as the argument directly or return from the function. In my map dispatch to props, I'll just say object. So I can finally refer to the action as a prop, which is going to be coming in, or as, I'll say props. I should say as a property, as a property of my props object, to be sort of specific, my props object, which could either be coming in as an argument, or it could be this.props if it's a class component, either way. So once this is all finally done, then I can refer to it directly. And I have to consideration, are there any arguments? And if so, consider invoking as the body of an arrow function, right? Or something like that, as the body of a function expression. I should just generalize it by saying that way. I should say in the body of, invoking in the body of a function expression callback, or if not, I can just provide a reference to the function. I can just provide a reference to the function as a callback. As an event callback. So what function am I talking about, by the way? The function is the function I'm talking about is an action creator. Okay. Because that's going to be the pattern that we use for the most part, rather than defining our actions in line within our components. So this is kind of like an outline of the steps we're going to be taking, and I just kind of want to make sure if we're hopping around at all during this example, I want everyone to keep in mind, like, these are the steps that we have to take. And so maybe before I even think about adding any functionality to this, let's actually build the functionality that I'm trying to add in the first place. So let's do that first. So let's actually start with the action itself. I think that makes the most sense. It's either it's kind of up to you, like what makes the most sense. We could either start with the action or start with the reducer. I think the action makes sense because then I can think about what it is I'm doing. And fortunately, in this case, it's really like so similar to what was happening before. It's basically, I know that I am going to save this thing to the back end. So I'm going to need both a success function and an asynchronous function. So I'll say like cat success is just going to be dislike cat success. I mean, it's going to be the same thing except dislike. Dislike cat success. So that's really easy. I literally copied and pasted that in place. My patch request is similarly going to be very, very similar. And so where are we here? Status is just going to be disliked. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't do something like make another function like a utility function or something that handles my fetches. For now, we're going to keep them totally separate, and then we can think about maybe refactoring as we go. This will be dislike cat. Disliked cat, dislike cat success. Okay, so does anyone see, did I miss anything there? Very, very similar stuff here. So now I have I have an asynchronous action to fire a patch request. First of all, I'm going to receive the cat as an argument, which I have to do, which I haven't built yet as my callback, but I will. I'm going to return a function that receives dispatch as an argument. I build the cat that I want to build, the cat object. I'm going to fire off my fetch request. The body includes the updated cat. Once we're done, we translate to JSON, and then I'm going to fire off a new action of dislike cat success. Again, passing in my cat. Dislike cat success. It's going to fire, which returns the sort of final action in this series, which finally is dispatched, and that's what actually updates the reducer and changes the global store. And very similar to, it's going to be very similar to this thing. And I'm going to just add this. I don't think anything else there needs to change. Those look very similar, and it feels like we're in pretty good shape. Cool.
Can the status be changed if it's dislike?
Thank you. Thank you. And notice that I'm literally making two different changes. I'm changing the back end, right, which is happening here, and I'm updating the front end, and that's happening here. Now, I could, as soon as I updated the back end, simply send a new GET request for all the cats again on the back end. Let's sort of reset them all. And you've seen that pattern before in some of your labs, I'm sure. But the problem with that is it's way more information it's way more of an information fetch than we want. And it's good to get in the habit of, like, let's just make sort of minimal changes. Let's not send huge chunks of data over the internet if it's not necessary. So we're sort of surgically updating things in a much more precise fashion. Cool. So now I feel like, if I didn't screw anything up, no promises, of course, that we should now have our action creator functions, our actions defined properly, and our reducer is updated. So now let's see if we can take display cat, and let's go in order here actually to make this make sense. First, I need to import dislike cat. From my actions, that's this one here, the one that's actually going to fire the fetch request. Okay. So first I import it, which allows me to now use it down here in my connect. So I can add this to my object. So I'm adding a key value pair to the object that's going in as the second argument here. This is just an object literal, and just so we're clear, it's the same thing as if I did this. Dislike cat. Dislike cat. This is just JavaScript shorthand. Okay, that's all it is. No different now versus there. Okay, it's the same thing. I have a key value. If I want the property value to be the same as what it's called currently as a variable, then I can simply pass the name of the variable, and that's what JavaScript will build for me, an object with a key called like cat and a key of dislike cat, and those properties will have values of whatever they're pointing to. In this case, they're both action creator. Cool. So I'm connecting those. I am grabbing some state as well, but now I have those actions, which now become available to this component as props, which now finally means I can do that destructuring I mentioned a moment ago, because now this is the incoming props object. So I can simply destructure and grab dislike cats from it, and now have dislike cats available, excuse me, dislike cat. I now have dislike cat available to me throughout the rest of this function. And specifically in my return, I want it as my onClick for disliking a cat. Now, the thing that obviously what I mentioned as far as an argument goes, I'll open this up so it's a little more visible, or well, maybe this will be better. Let's change the structure here. I don't know if that's more readable or not. You guys can agree or disagree that that's better, but I think maybe it is. Okay, so notice that if I didn't need to pass an argument, I could just pass a reference, right? Dislike cat. And I'd be good to go. But I do need to pass an argument, and the argument I need to pass is cat. I can't just do this because now my onClick is the result of immediately invoking dislike cat. If I immediately invoke dislike cat, I'll get back, I will actually get a response, but the response is like weird. It's actually going to be this entire function. And if now this function is the callback immediately, and this function does not. So basically what ends up happening is dispatch will strangely enough be the event because that'll be the first argument supplied when this thing tries to get called, and that's going to be a problem if it even gets that far. So instead what we have to do is wrap this as a function expression, and that should work now. Okay, hopefully. If we didn't break anything. Any questions up to right now? We just went through a full cycle of adding an action, adding to the reducer. I should say adding an asynchronous action creator, adding an action creator, which finally produces the action that updates the reducer, adding a case to the reducer to handle it, going back to our component, importing our action creator, adding the action creator to our reducer via an object. In this case, we chose to do it inline as the second argument. Which gives me that action as props to my component, which I destructure the props argument, which now I have direct access to that thing like cat and dislike cat, which is the one we just added. I need to pass an argument, so I wrap it into the body of a function expression, which I pass as my callback. Any questions about that flow?
I just want to make sure I understand that the action is updating the database. So you have the async action that's updating the database, right? And then you have the reducer that's updating the front end.
So the action creator dislike cat, which is this function right here, is actually what's updating the database, because there's my fetch request. And it's taking an argument. The argument it's taking is the cat object coming from this, whichever this particular cat that's incoming to this component is. I'm passing it as an argument to this function. I'm simply invoking this function, like you can think of it straight up JavaScript at first. And what that's doing is firing off this patch request. Well, that's what's updating the database, this thing right here. So as far as the database update, whoops, what did I just do? Something terrible. Oh my gosh. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. So this is what's updating the database. By invoking this function, I am updating the database. That's right. So as soon as I click whatever this thing is, in this case, it happens to be a button that says dislike cat. When I click it, it's going to fire this as my callback, and that's going to invoke this function here, which is going to send sends my fetch request. When I return it, it is invoking it, right? So the fetch request is invoked, and then the action then it further fires an action that is going to then turn around and update my global store itself. So that's what this dispatch is doing. I'm receiving dispatch as an argument, which allows me to then, once I get the information I need, the return from the database, then I can send the action. Now, just to be clear, I could do this. Oops, let's just do it a little better. There we go. I could do this. And actually, before we do, let's look at it both ways. So I'm going to save this as it was because I don't think I've tried this yet, right? So, okay, great. So const new cats. Oh yeah. Can't do that, can I? Cats. Good enough. I could just use a let there too, I guess. All right, so let's just see that this works. So if I dislike Roger, I've only got a couple cats left to try this with. So first, let's look at Redux and just make sure this is going to work. Let's look at our state. I'm going to dislike Roger. Okay, Roger ended up in this category. If I check my network, a patch request was sent. Roger was disliked, number 30, that's Roger, that's all good news. I look at Redux, my store is updated. Cat number 30, Roger, is that you? Oh, cat number 29, I guess would be 30, that's Roger. He's now been disliked. If I look at the diff, he went from undecided to disliked. This is all good news. Now, I'm gonna show you something. I could do this. In fact, I could do, well, you know what, just for, well, yeah, screw it. I could get rid of this too. Save that. And I could do this. Okay. Now, what did I just do? I got rid of my .thens, so I'm still sending my fetch request, but I'm not doing anything whatsoever with the response. Okay. I'm immediately, whoa, almost screwed that up. There we go. Oh wait, sorry. Let's not be crazy here. So as soon as I have a disliked cat, for example, let's do this correctly here. Disliked cat. Okay. So notice that as soon as I have all the information I need and I've changed the cat, what if I dispatch here? So in other words, before I even send my fetch request, I'm going to go ahead and dispatch this guy up here. And let's see what happens. So let's try that on Bowler. So I'm going to dislike Bowler. And Bowler, sure enough, went to the dislike category. Sure enough, if we look at the diff of cat 30 now, which is Bowler, went from undecided to disliked. If I look at my network tab, I can't really see the response. I may not really be, there's no response because well, there is a response still, but I didn't do anything with it, right? I changed Bowler to disliked, but I didn't even care about this response. I can see it because it's showing up in my dev tools, but I didn't do anything with it. Everything still worked just fine. What's the difference? Can anybody describe the difference from what I had before to what I'm having now?
It didn't go to the server, to the back end.
Well, I did. You can see the change right there, right? Here's the network request. Here's the headers. It was a patch request to cats 31. That was this cat right here. That is Bowler. There he is, right? Bowler just went to the disliked category. The back end was clearly updated. If I refresh my page, when I get my initial cats load, Bowler will remain in the disliked category. So everything worked fine. But what's the difference? There is a difference, but it's subtle, and it's more like a difference for us as developers to be aware of and to make decisions about, less like a difference. So what I'll say first is, in this case, there's no difference in terms of what happened overall. The back end updated, the front end updated, everybody's happy.
What about the store?
Store updated, right? You can see if we go back out, we saw that Bowler down here, number 30, I think. Open this up a little bit. If we look at cat number 30, that is in fact, why can't I see the rest of them? Oh, actually, it's state, okay. There he is, number 30, it's Bowler, and he is in fact disliked. The store updated. Yes, Kevin and AJ, or whoever else said it, yes. So talk to me more, like, what do you mean? pessimistic versus optimistic. Updating the store before the back end. That's all it is. It's a matter of, it's my preferred order of operations. What did I decide I wanted to do here? And the question is, do I want to change the front end, what happens on the front end, before I change what happens on the back end? How important is it? And the considerations I have to take into place here. How fast do I want to show the user something, right? So if I'm going to wait for the back end, there's going to be maybe some kind of lag. Is my application fun? Is it like serious? And in this, so pessimistic versus optimistic. Kevin or anyone else, do you want to take like a stab at kind of describing what does that even mean?
So with pessimistic rendering, you wait for the back end to update and then update the front end. With optimistic, you say, well, I know that the back end will get updated, so we'll go ahead and update the front end, and then the back end will get
That's
updated.
exactly right. Can anybody think of like some pros and cons? Because this is not a black and white thing. This is not a you always do this and don't ever do that. This is make a decision based on what you're doing. Anybody? Any thoughts? It's just a matter of order of operations. Do I want to wait? What I was doing at first was I was waiting for that fetch request to come back with a response. And I was actually using the response itself to update the front end, as opposed to the possibility of what I'm doing now, which as soon as I get my cat, I'm changing its status and I'm going to go ahead and fire off just like cat. In fact, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and grab like cat success and I could fire that as in my body of my callback too. I could fire off two actions from one click if I wanted to. Do them both at the same time, separately. So like, what gives? Like, give me some thoughts. Like, what are some things that would go into making that decision of whether to pessimistically or optimistically, pessimistically update the DOM or optimistically update the DOM? Yeah, Sarah, good call. So like, imagine you're a bank, right? So if I suppose I type in like, I don't know, make a mistake when I type something and I deposit like a million when I only, or a million, yeah, right. So deposit like 1,000 when I only meant to deposit 100. Do you want that person's balance to just like immediately show up before it comes back in the back end and says, excuse me, this check does not say 1,000, right? No, you don't want that optimism. You want to make sure that you get the right stuff, right? Or on the other hand, if I try to withdraw a bunch of money, you don't want that, well, of course they do this, but you don't want, they shouldn't like give you the money first and then tell you that you owe them a bunch of fees, right? Of course, that's what banks do because we won't get into that. But a pessimistic approach makes more sense in that sense in like the financial world, because you wouldn't want to be showing someone something that's not true. You want to make sure that you're in line. Something like cat Tinder, who cares, right? It would be fine to kind of optimistically update. But the thing is, suppose something went wrong in the back end, right? Maybe we're not authorized to do what we just did. Maybe the server's down, maybe whatever the case. How important is it that the user immediately sees that there was an issue with the server? You could come back around and like, I could go ahead and optimistically update and then do something like, then add in my then, take my response, translate to JSON, call.json. And then I could do something like, basically stop and look at this response. Something like if r.errors, right? If this thing is carrying errors, then like handle that basically. Of course, this is JavaScript, so something like this, right? And then like handle it. Or whatever, tell the user. Whatever has to happen. And I could also throw a .catch on here, right? What's the difference here? What does .catch do anyway? Which I could simply do this.
Does .catch just allow the error to be displayed?
Well, yeah, I mean, it gives us an error, right? So what if let's do this. So what I'm going to do is, Okay, so let's see what happens. I don't know if, I'm not sure what's gonna happen here. Let's see. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to break my fetch request. So I'm going to say, instead of, this is for, so first I'm running out of cats to like, I only have one cat left. So let's change that. Let me just go back and let me break into my back end before we add functionality. And suppose I want to say like cat dot all from like, I don't know, 15 to 20 dot each cat. We're going to update to status of undecided. So that'll give us 5 more cats to play with, hopefully. What did I screw up?
You missed a quote.
Dang it, I always do that. That's gonna break everything. So let's kill that for a second. Nope. Good, okay. Try that again. Okay, so hopefully those are updated. Exit this, we'll see if that worked. And force a refresh. Hopefully we'll get some more undecided cats. Okay, so now we have more cats to play with. So now let's do this. So I'm gonna break my fetch request and I'll throw a Z in there. Okay, cats. So now let's see what happens when I try to, it's dislike, right? Yeah, dislike a cat. All right, so I'm gonna try and dislike Snowball. Okay, actually Snowball went to disliked. Wait a minute. All right, so that might actually make sense. And let's look for a second. Let's look and see what happened in our console, or sorry, in our network tab. And notice that I have a bad request. So Snowball was disliked and updated appropriately, right? If we look, in fact, at our Redux store, Redux is going to tell us that Snowball was disliked, number 15 there. But if we look at our console, first let's look at network. We can see that it was a failed request because it's a 404, not found. And if we look at our console, what we got here was no console log, huh? Was I expecting a console log? I was. Oh, console, dang it. Console.log. There we go. Okay. So let's try that again. I'm going to dislike the Grinch. Whoops. Notice Snowball just popped back, by the way. When I saved, we got a fresh request to the back end. Snowball. So now if like I'm using the application, now I'm confused, right? I just dislike Snowball. I'm not looking at the console. And like, why is Snowball back? I'm going to dislike Snowball again. Surprised I'm not getting a console log. Why am I not getting a console log? Maybe this is what's not. Let's put a, let's just console log the response as well. Okay, so either way, we should get a console log. Hopefully. So now I'm going to dislike, there we go. So this is the response that I'm getting, and this is coming from my cat. Oh, it's error, not errors. Okay. So this is what I wanted was R if r.error console log the response. Okay, so we should basically see the same thing. Oh,
Was that an arrow?
thank you. Oh. Oh, can I do this sentence? Fine. Do I have everything I need there? I hope so. Let's find out. No, yep, okay. Snowball keeps popping back, right? If I'm a user, I'm really upset right now. So I'm gonna dislike Snowball again, get Snowball back, and here's that response we're seeing from right here. This is. Notice that we're not getting a catch. So a 404 error is not actually gonna fire off this catch. We're getting actually the server is responding okay, but it's giving us a 404. It's saying not found. So I'm sure we're printing off the error here. So I might have this sort of a clause in my response, even though this is sort of what appears to be everything's working, as opposed to like if I do, let's see, what if I, let's see, this is my update method. So let's find the update action. Source, public, blah, 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 blah. Reducers, where am I here? Oh, I'm in the wrong repo. Open up our backend. Somewhere. Here's my desktop. I no longer have a desktop. Oh, okay. I guess that's it. All right. So let's find our update and let's just cause something terrible to happen here. Raise, I don't know, params.inspect for whatever reason. Okay. So I'm going to save that. And again, let's try to send that patch request one more time. Notice we did not refresh here because that's a backend change I just made. Now when I dislike, let's see, it's still, I guess it's still coming from, is that still coming from this? Let's see if that's coming from the catch or coming from our then. Yeah, it's still just coming from the then. Okay. Oh, that's because it's still 404. Knucklehead. Sorry, I changed it to cats. Okay, duh. All right, so now let's see. This should be a good it should be a good request. Now causing a server error. Let's see if there's any difference. And now notice we get a 500 error, but it's still just coming back from this response. Let's see what will cause this to actually give us the catch in the catch. Now I'm not finding my terminal. Fine. Okay. Let's kill our cat server. Is this our cat server? Yes. Okay. So now there is no server running. When I try to dislike now, it's uncaught because I got rid of my .catch. .catch, console log. And one more time, we'll try to dislike a cat. Hopefully. Oh, right, there are no cats. Of course, now everything broke because. So I'm doing a terrible job of demonstrating this, but the idea is that I can use a combination of my thens and checking to see if there's an error coming through, or catching, depending on what's happening here, to actually error handle what's going on with my fetch requests. So besides that, once I killed the server, of course, when I clicked on the callback, cat wasn't there, which caused a different error in React rather than, of course, what I was intending to happen. So what I would need to do is run the server long enough for it to load, and then kill it, and then try one more time to see if we can land in that catch. Yay, rail, oh my gosh. Any questions while I'm putting on this show of trying and catching and trying to catch things? Any questions about the flow? Anything we've talked about thus far?
So does .catch display the error from the backend, or I'm not really sure what it does?
You're right, and that's what I'm trying. That's exactly what I'm trying terribly poorly to get going here. So let's see what happens now. I've got this thing running. It has pulled from the backend successfully. Now I'm going to kill the server. Now I'm going to click on dislike, and now this is where what happened was there was a JavaScript error in the execution of what just happened, right? The JavaScript error, that catch, let me go away there. Nobody wants to see you. Menu, okay. Where were we here? Oh, I'm not looking at the code. Here we go. why are my desktop set up all funky? Sorry, this isn't, anyway, whatever. So what I'm trying to point out is when we use .catch, basically if any of this triggers an error client side, then catch will fire. If anything happens on the server side that's an error, it doesn't matter what kind of error, if it's a 400 or 500 or whatever, it's still going to come back as effectively, not success, but in terms of it's going to hit this dot then, right? And we can still translate to JSON and get a nice object that we can then look at. So what we would have to do to handle that would be to open up this second then and just real quick run this if there's an error and say, okay, if there's an error, then let's do what we're going to do. It may be console log, it may be, of course, something entirely different. Otherwise, we're going to handle it appropriately. And so, like, if this thing, let's see if that else, and then this is kind of like what really happens, or something like that. I don't know why I said it that way, but like what happens on success, not what really happens. Okay, success. There we go. Right, and so this is where I would actually dispatch if I was going to use pessimistic rendering. That's where I'm actually going to fire this dispatch. So we'll actually do that now. So I just want to compare and contrast and show you different ways that we could be doing this, right? And actually, this would be now the response again. I'll just call it response. Cool. So that's the difference. If a JavaScript error is incurred here, then our catch is going to fire. Whether we get a server, a 200, 300, 400, or 500 error, well, 200, of course, is happy, and 300 is redirect. But any of that stuff is still going to appear here within the response. And so we could always just check this way and see if it's holding an error. If it is, then it will come with a property, the object translated into JSON will come with a property called error. So that's the difference. Does that make sense? If a JavaScript error is actually fired here, then we're going to use this catch. So that's what we're preventing here. Type error, failed to fetch. Okay, that's a runtime error. So now I'm hitting that instead of like crashing and terrible things happening. But notice that like everything else is still happening fine on the front end, right? On the front end, since I was handling it optimistically, I'm still getting my disliked cats thrown over to my disliked cats category. Okay. Redux is still happy to update. All right. Any questions about that? So it's up to you to, if you want to use optimistic or pessimistic. Generally, like, sort of on the front end, Redux is our single source of truth, but let's place that on another single source of truth, like the main single source of truth in terms of what the state of our information is, which is our database, and make sure that our database is the authority of what's happening, and therefore only update the front end once the database has been updated properly. And then if it doesn't update properly, we can handle that according to where, in either here, in other words, within this if statement or within this catch, depending on what's going on. So just a little bit more, and by the way, I didn't save this, which is why it was still working on the front end. Of course, now I save it, and I try to, just like Moon, well, now there's gonna be a problem because it's not gonna load, because I've killed my server. Which is probably something I should handle. Like I probably shouldn't be displaying buttons to the user that are clickable until they're safe to be clicked without causing all kinds of terrible red things to happen in the console like that, right? Status of loading, for example, not a bad idea at all. In fact, let's do that real quick, right? So we could do within a particular cat's array for, well, not cat's array, I guess in our global store, we could do, let's see, state equals, I don't know, I'm just trying to think for a second. Where could we put this? We could add a new piece of state. In other words, a new property called loading and have it either be Boolean true or Boolean false. I could break this into an object where it's an array and another property of loading, which would be true or false. So I can either be like generally loading within my application, I'm loading everything, or on a property per property basis, I could be loading if I'm loading from different pieces of from different APIs, for example, within my application. So I don't know if we have time to really implement that right now, or if that's really worth. But that's another option you could do, and then we could look at loading and just conditionally not show half of our application until loading is done. Just show like a spinny or a happy face. And of course, that's what you're familiar with using the internet, using applications. We see just like a little spinny or a happy face or like a ... or whatever animation is trying to keep you from clicking away or closing the application until it's finished loading, and then you're presented with an interface that can be interacted with. So this is not the greatest pattern to use, where I'm going ahead and showing those buttons with their callbacks, which of course break if the cats haven't actually come back from the back end. Cool. So I can fire my server back up. Oops. Any questions? Anybody have any questions for me in the last 5 minutes or so that we're looking at this for tonight anyway? And I'm pretty happy about where we are. We have the main functionality. The one thing we don't have is like a redeem or like a reset, I guess, reset cat. We could reset cat back to undecided. And the nice thing too about when you're adding different actions around the same object, it's going to be so similar. So why don't you all help me build a reset cat? Well, before we do, let me cut out, because we've gotten like and dislike done, right? So let's actually now, I don't know if you recall, if you have an application that's all React and you're adding Redux, which I don't recommend, but this is for demonstration, then work your way, start from the children, work your way up in terms of like making that final translation. Otherwise you get errors along the way that make it hard to debug. So let me sort of finish that around liking and disliking cats. So first of all, handle like click is what used to be coming through as a prop, okay, to display cats. So let's get rid of it here, which is sort of at the bottom. I've already eliminated references to it. So we should still be up and running here. Maybe. Okay, good, we are. And then now I can actually dislike those cats that I disliked a minute ago. Oh wait, what did I? Oh yeah, I actually changed my backend. Hang on a second. It was this guy. Let me get rid of my backend error on updating cats. There we go. Okay, let's get rid of that now. So now that this should actually work, let's see if I dislike my cat. There we go. Now we're in business. We can dislike cats to our heart's content. So let's see. Display cat is being rendered by center container. So let's find center container, which is in source components, center container. It's no longer, handle like click is no longer needed. So let's just get rid of it there. This looks nice and clean now, right? I'm simply passing children of display, next up, and upload. It doesn't even look like I'm using any props anymore. I don't see any reference to props anymore, so I can simply get rid of that as an argument. I don't need to reference it. Center container is being rendered by app.js. We find app.js, I find center container. I no longer need to pass a prop of handle like click. I just am going to render my center container. And look how clean that is now. Center container, super clean. And display cat is now connecting to Redux, both some state and some actions, which I'm using for callbacks on my buttons. No longer need to pass down to an intermediate that needs to know nothing about what I was just giving it before. So that's kind of finishing the process of cleaning up unneeded props that I was passing down to like and to dislike cats. So we still need, so handle change of heart would be kind of like reset cat. That might be like the next thing to think about. Or the next thing, again, this could be like audience choice. Like, would we rather think about what it would, attaching Redux to uploading a cat? Which one makes more sense? Ooh, there's some questions. A recording of setting up Foreman, connecting with the API. No, but we could do it, Ariana. So if you want, we could add that as a study group, and we could hook this up with Foreman if you want. Yeah, and there's no requirement. Like if you don't get Foreman set up, that's fine. You don't have to use Foreman. Foreman's a recommendation. It's a cool tool. It's a neat thing, but you're still running servers on different ports. Like either way, that has to happen. You have to have separate servers. If they live in 2 different repos, that's fine. It's no problem. No problem. With React Router, would include a redirect to another route in the action? You could, I mean, like a history.push, basically, sure. You could do that. It's possible. An action could include a change of venue, sure. Yeah. Good question. That's it. And one thing about that is like action creators, that is definitely a side effect. And so the idea of doing that would step outside of like a pure function. But of course, a fetch is, this is a side effect clearly, like an asynchronous, oops, here we are. These are obviously asynchronous things that are happening that are having severe side effects, intentional side effects on databases. And so these are not pure either. What has to stay pure are our reducers. Our reducers must be pure functions. And as much as possible, we should be staying as pure as we can other than that as well. But certainly we're going to need to redirect within our application. Cool. Yeah, so I feel like, I mean, we're pretty much at time right now for this particular session. This was an hour. We had an hour blocked off for this. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording for now. Stop share. Stop recording.